folder landed in front of her with a sound like a hand slap. Colonel Vance's open palm, flat on the tabletop, and then the slide of manila across laminate until it stopped at her forearm. 14 officers around that table, and every one of them heard it. Sector 12 debrief, Vance said. Background reporting needs to be organized into something a staff officer can actually use. Clerical work, someone has to do it. He was already looking at the map board when he said the last part. He wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to the room. Her name was Specialist Calla Reeve. She had been attached to our forward command post at Fob Witten for 11 days. She wore the same subdued multicam as the rest of us. No insignia on the collar that meant anything to anyone in that room. A stitched name-a-tape that said Reeve and nothing else. She had come in with a civilian intelligence liaison team and been handed a corner desk in the FLOD 210 and a laptop that ran slow. What we knew it was quiet. She asked specific questions. And she had a habit of pulling the topographic overlays out of the map case and spreading them across the floor of her tent when she thought no one was watching. Nobody asked why. Nobody thought it mattered. I signed the routing memo at 0930 that morning without reading her analysis. Filed it under background reference non-actionable. I used a stamp. It took 4 seconds. Battalion stepped off at 11:30 on the Aloe Road axis, Sector 12, northeast approach. Colonel Vance had chosen a different route than the one her analysis recommended. Not because he'd read it and disagreed, because her analysis hadn't made it out of the background file. The route Vance chose was shorter. It was the obvious route, the one any staff officer, drawing lines on a map in an air-conditioned TOC, would have chosen. I was at the radio table at 13:47 when the first transmission came in. Witten, Maine, this is Calo 6. We have eyes on vehicle debris, east side of the road, grid 447-229, halting to assess. Grid 447-229 was the first turn on the northeast approach. I pulled her analysis out of the background file at 13:51. I don't know what I was looking for. Some part of me, the part that had been doing this long enough to feel things in my chest, before I understood them in my head, was already moving toward that folder before the second transmission came. Witten, Maine, Calo 6. Taking fire from the north ridgeline and the culvert at grid 451-2 for 31. Multiple positions. Request fire support, over. 451-231 was in her report. Not as a suggested waypoint, as a primary trigger point. She had written, and I read it standing at the radio table while the transmissions were coming in. Any element approaching the 447 turn from the southwest will present a channel profile to the 451 culvert, offering a two-sided engagement corridor with a vehicle width choke approximately 40 meters before the bend. If a second blocking element is positioned at the 463 junction, withdrawal along the primary axis becomes untenable. She had written that. She had written it 11 days ago, before we'd even finalized the route, based on nothing more visible to the rest of us than pattern analysis of old grid logs and a set of topographic overlays she had laid on the floor of tent. I kept reading while Corporal Ansel worked the radio beside me. The battalion was pinned. They had hit the choke at the bend, exactly as she mapped it, and the secondary blocking element had moved into position at the 463 junction within 4 minutes of first contact, exactly as she had described. Her document ran to 6 pages. The last page was a single paragraph. The most likely time window for this action is the 1300 to 1530 block, given shadow angle, on the north ridgeline and historical pattern data from Sector 12 incidents in the preceding 90 days. I recommend the alternate axis through grid 438, adding 14 minutes to the route time. I am available to walk through the analysis with any staff officer at their convenience. At their convenience. Took us 4 hours and 2 close air support packages to extract the battalion. 11 wounded, 3 vehicles destroyed, no fatalities, which was not luck. It was the grid work the battalion's lead element did once they understood where they were, and it was the door kicking their platoon leaders did to break the choke before the secondary position could fully close. They were good soldiers in a bad situation. But the situation had been written in that background file at 0930, filed under non-actionable, stamped with my rubber stamp. The after-action review was at 1900 in the T-Oak. Colonel Vance ran it. 14 officers, the same 14 from the morning brief. Specialist Reeve was not initially on the attendance list. I had put her on it at 18:30, 45 minutes after I finished reading her analysis for the third time. I pulled the routing memo I had signed, one that filed her work as background reference, and I put it in my left breast pocket. I don't know why. It wasn't a decision. It was the kind of thing your hands do when your head is still catching up. She sat at the far end of the table. Same uniform, same nematope, same quiet. She had a notepad, but she didn't write anything down. She watched Vance work through the timeline on the map board, and her face was level the whole time. Not satisfied, not cold, not waiting for anything. Just present. It was the stillest face in the room. When Vance reached the contact point at 447, he stopped. Someone had placed her analysis on the table in front of his position. I hadn't done it. I looked at Ansel's across the table. Ansel looked at me. To this day, I don't know who put it there. Vance picked it up. He read the first page standing. Then he sat down and read the rest. The room was very quiet. You could hear the generator outside the TOC wall, and the distant sound of a rotor somewhere to the northwest, and nothing else. When he finished, he set the document down parallel to the edge of the table, squared it, the way you square something when you don't know what else to do with your hands, and he stood up. He walked the length of the table, him maybe 6 seconds. He stopped in front of Specialist Reeve, and he came to attention, and he held it. He didn't speak. There wasn't anything to say that the standing didn't already say better. She looked at him for a moment, then she nodded once. Not a bow, not a gesture of warmth, just an acknowledgement that the thing had happened, and she picked up her notepad and stood. She walked out of the TOC without waiting for dismissal. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke until the door had been closed for a full 5 seconds. I learned her call sign that night, not from her, from the classified attachment at the back of the analysis, the one I hadn't reached when I stamped the routing memo at 0930. Ember Watch. There was a classification header above it, and a line below that I will not reproduce here, but which told me plainly, that the work she had been doing in the corner of the S2 tent was the same work that every unit in our theater had been using for the better part of 2 years without knowing where it came from. The doctrine had no author on the cover page. She had not put her name on it. The routing memo is still in my breast pocket. I transferred it to a new shirt when the old one wore through. I don't carry it as a reminder to do better, or as a lesson about listening to analysts, or for any reason I could explain to someone without sounding like I was making it about myself. I carry it because 11 soldiers went into that choke and came back out, and the reason they came back out was the grid work their leaders did in the moment, and the reason the moment was as bad as it was is 4 seconds and a rubber stamp. Both of those things are true, and neither one cancels the other out. Ember Watch. The word was in the footer of a 6-page document that I had decided, in 4 seconds, not to read.